Grace Washington was 74 years old and running out of time to find her daughter. What she didn't know was that the dying Hell's Angel bleeding on Route 45 held the key to a miracle she'd prayed for her entire life. Lightning split the Texas sky as Grace knelt in the pouring rain beside a twisted Harley-Davidson. Blood pooled beneath the massive biker's head, his Death's Head MC patches soaked crimson in the storm. Grace's weathered hands moved with practiced precision, pressing torn fabric against his wounds. Most people would have driven past. Most people would have been terrified of the skull tattoos, the leather vest, the reputation that came with those patches. But Grace Washington saw only what her nursing training taught her to see, someone dying who could still be saved. At 74, Grace thought her time for miracles had passed. But as thunder crashed overhead and she fought to keep this stranger alive, Grace had no idea she was touching the one person on earth who could grant her lifelong wish. The photograph tucked in his vest pocket, barely visible in the storm, would soon change everything. But 3 days earlier, Grace Washington was facing the reality that some dreams might die with us. Grace opened Washington Flowers at dawn Tuesday morning, the same routine she'd followed for 30 years. At 74, she moved with the steady efficiency of someone who'd worked hard her entire life. Her hands, though lined with age, remained steady from decades of arranging delicate blooms and before that, 20 years as a nursing aide at Sunset Manor. The brass bell above her door chimed as Mrs. Carter shuffled in for her weekly bouquet. "Morning, Grace. The usual irises for my Harold's grave?" "Of course, honey." Grace's fingers worked automatically, selecting the perfect purple blooms. Harold had been gone 8 years, but Mrs. Carter never missed their Tuesday ritual. Grace understood. Some loves transcend death. As she wrapped the flowers in tissue paper, Grace caught her reflection in the shop window. When had those lines around her eyes grown so deep? When had her hair become completely silver? Next month marked her 75th birthday, and something about that number felt final. Not because she was sick, Grace was remarkably healthy for her age. Her doctor called her a medical marvel with the blood pressure of a 50-year-old and the energy to work 10-hour days. But time had a way of closing doors, and Grace was starting to accept that some wishes might never come true. After Mrs. Carter left, Grace climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment above the shop. The small space told the story of her 54-year search. Filing cabinets overflowed with adoption agency correspondence. Phone books from 12 states lined her bookshelf. Her kitchen table held printouts from genealogy websites that her neighbor's teenage daughter helped her navigate. Every lead had gone cold. Grace opened the worn manila folder labeled Lily and pulled out the only photograph she had. Herself at 17, holding a newborn for exactly 4 hours before giving her to the adoption agency. The baby's face was peaceful, perfect, unaware that her young mother's heart was breaking with every passing minute. Lily Grace Washington, the birth certificate read in faded ink. Grace had chosen the name carefully, hoping someday her daughter would know she was loved from the first breath. Born April 3, 1969. Weight, 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Father, unknown. Grace traced the baby's tiny fingers in the photograph. "Where are you, baby girl? Are you happy? Do you have children of your own?" The questions had haunted her for decades. Closed adoption from 1969 meant records sealed by law. Private investigators she couldn't really afford yielded nothing but false hope and empty bank accounts. Every Lily Washington she found on Facebook led to polite conversations with strangers who weren't her daughter. Grace's nursing background showed in how she cared for her neighbors. When old Mr. Rodriguez fell last month, Grace was first on scene, checking his vitals and stabilizing him until paramedics arrived. When the Martinez family's baby spiked a fever, they knocked on Grace's door at midnight, knowing she'd know what to do. "You've been like a mother to half this neighborhood," Mrs. Carter often said. Grace always smiled sadly at the comment. She'd been everyone's mother except to the one who was actually hers. 20 years at Sunset Manor taught her to handle medical emergencies calmly. She left nursing only when arthritis made lifting patients difficult, but the skills never left her. Grace kept a comprehensive first aid kit in her Honda. Not the basic version most people carried, but professional-grade supplies that reflected her training. Her days followed predictable patterns. Open the shop at 7, arrange flowers for weddings, funerals, anniversaries, help elderly customers who treated her like family, close at 6, climb upstairs to her small apartment and stare at Lily's photograph until sleep came. The dreams had intensified recently. Always the same scenario, a young woman with Grace's eyes standing in the flower shop saying, "Mama Grace?" Grace would reach out, desperate to see the woman's face clearly, but always woke before the moment of recognition. At 74, Grace felt urgency she'd never acknowledged before, not from illness, but from the mathematics of life. If Lily was alive, she'd be 54 now. Grace might have 10 good years left, maybe 15 if she was lucky. But every year that passed made the search harder, made reunion less likely. Grace had made a decision. After her 75th birthday next month, she'd stop the active searching. She'd keep the flower shop open as long as she could, hoping Lily might someday walk through the door. But the private investigators, the website searches, the letters to adoption agencies, she'd let those go. Some wishes, she'd realized, might be too big for one lifetime. That evening, Grace prepared for her weekly volunteer shift teaching CPR at the community center. 15 years she'd maintained this commitment to the Red Cross, her way of giving back the medical skills Sunset Manor had taught her. At 74, she was the oldest instructor, but her steady hands and calm demeanor made her invaluable for training nervous first-time students. As she gathered her teaching materials, Grace whispered the prayer she'd said every night for 54 years. "Lord, let me find my Lily before I'm too old to be the mother she deserves." She had no idea that prayer was about to be answered in the most extraordinary way imaginable. But first, she had to drive home on Route 45. On Tuesday night, Grace's routine drive home from her weekly Red Cross volunteer shift would put her exactly where destiny needed her to be. Grace finished teaching CPR at the community center around 8:30 p.m., her final student successfully completing chest compressions on the practice dummy. "Remember," she told the young father as he packed up, "if someone's not breathing, you're their only chance. Don't hesitate." The weather forecast had missed this one completely. What started as light drizzle during her class had transformed into a violent thunderstorm. Grace stood in the community center doorway, watching sheets of rain pound the parking lot. "You sure you don't want to wait it out, Grace?" asked Marcus, the center director. "This storm looks nasty." Grace shook her head. "I've driven through worse, honey. Besides, Mrs. Carter worries if I'm out too late." She pulled her jacket tight and hurried to her Honda, the reliable car she'd maintained for 12 years because buying new seemed wasteful when this one ran fine. Route 45 was deserted. Most sensible people avoided this winding back road in good weather, let alone during a storm like this. Grace chose it because it passed the old Baptist church where she'd been baptized at age 8. Something about seeing that white steeple always brought her peace, especially after teaching life-saving skills that reminded her how fragile existence could be. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the torrential rain. Grace leaned forward, squinting through the darkness. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. She should have listened to Marcus and waited, but the decision was made now. Lightning illuminated the road ahead in stark, terrifying detail. Grace slammed the brakes, her Honda skidding on the wet asphalt before coming to a stop. Through the storm, she could see the twisted wreckage of a massive Harley-Davidson wrapped around the guardrail. Steam rose from its engine, mixing with the rain in ghostly wisps. 30 feet away, a man in full leather lay motionless on the wet pavement. Grace's nursing training kicked in before fear had time to register. She grabbed her emergency flashlight from the glove compartment and her comprehensive first aid kit from the trunk. The Death's Head MC patches on the man's vest were clearly visible even in the storm. Skull imagery, fierce reputation, the kind of biker most people crossed the street to avoid. But Grace saw only what 20 years at Sunset Manor had taught her to see. Someone dying who could still be saved. She knelt beside him, rain soaking through her jacket in seconds. His breathing was shallow but present, pulse weak but detectable. The head wound bled profusely. Scalp injuries always looked worse than they were, but the blood loss was still dangerous. "Sir, can you hear me?" Grace checked his airways, tilting his head slightly to prevent choking. No response. His skin felt cold and clammy, classic signs of shock setting in. Grace estimated he'd been here maybe 10 minutes. Long enough for significant blood loss, but not so long that it was hopeless. She had a window to save him, but it was closing fast. Route 45 was notorious for poor cell reception, and this storm had knocked out what little service existed. Grace pulled out her phone anyway. No signal. She was this stranger's only chance, just like she'd been Lily's only chance 54 years ago when she'd carried her to term despite having nothing. The isolation factor terrified her. This winding road saw maybe 5 cars on a good day. In weather like this, she might be the only person to pass for hours. Grace positioned her Honda with emergency flashers on, creating the only warning for other motorists. But in this storm, few people were driving this route. Grace opened her first aid kit. Not the basic version most people carried, but professional-grade supplies reflecting her medical background. Gauze, pressure bandages, instant cold packs, even a small oxygen canister she kept for elderly neighbors who sometimes needed assistance. The man's condition deteriorated as she worked. His breathing became more labored, pulse weakening. Grace recognized the signs she'd seen too many times at Sunset Manor: shock progressing toward organ failure. Without immediate intervention, he'd die within the hour. At 74, Grace wasn't as strong as she once was, but her nursing experience compensated for physical limitations. She knew how to position her body for maximum leverage, how to conserve energy while maintaining pressure on wounds, how to read vital signs by touch when visibility was poor. As Grace worked, a small photograph fell from the man's vest pocket. Rain immediately threatened to destroy it, so she instinctively protected it without looking closely, tucking it safely inside her own jacket. Something about how carefully it had been positioned suggested it was precious to him, possibly his most treasured possession. "Stay with me, baby," Grace whispered, channeling the same authority she'd used with hundreds of dying residents. "Someone's waiting for you at home, I know they are." The storm intensified around them. Lightning struck nearby, making Grace's position dangerous. Standing water threatened to undermine her footing, but Grace had made her choice. She was settling in for a long fight to keep this stranger alive. In those critical 47 minutes before help arrived, Grace Washington didn't just save a life. She performed a miracle that would echo through both their worlds. Grace's 20 years at Sunset Manor took control of her body and mind. She positioned herself to assess the biker systematically, her movements economical in practice despite the chaos around them. ABCs first: airway clear, breathing shallow but present, circulation weak but detectable. The head wound commanded immediate attention. Grace knew scalp injuries bled dramatically, but this one was genuinely severe. She pulled her largest pressure bandage from the kit, applying steady force with her weathered hands while using her body to shield him from the driving rain. "That's it, honey. Breathe with me," Grace spoke continuously, her voice cutting through the storm with the same calm authority she'd used at hundreds of deathbeds. "In and out. Someone's waiting for you to come home." Minutes 1, 8. Grace worked methodically, checking for additional injuries while maintaining pressure on the head wound. Her fingers found a weak pulse at his wrist, rapid, thready, classic signs of blood loss and shock. No obvious broken bones, but potential spinal injury meant she couldn't move him. The photograph fell from his pocket again. This time, in a brief lightning flash, Grace caught a glimpse of the image, a young black woman's face, someone beautiful and somehow familiar. Grace protected it carefully, sensing its importance to him, though her focus remained entirely on keeping him alive. Minutes 9, 20. His breathing became irregular. Grace recognized the warning signs from her nursing days: brain swelling, increasing intracranial pressure. She made a critical decision, using her folded jacket to slightly elevate his head while maintaining spinal alignment. From her comprehensive first aid kit, Grace retrieved instant cold packs, activating them and applying them strategically to reduce swelling. Her movements showed years of experience managing medical emergencies with limited resources. The storm worsened, but Grace had positioned her Honda to create a windbreak. She opened both doors, using them as shields against the driving rain. Her emergency tarp, spread carefully, created a makeshift shelter that kept both of them relatively dry. Minutes 21:35. Crisis point arrived suddenly. His pulse became barely detectable, breathing stopped for terrifying seconds. Grace's training kicked in with muscle memory that transcended her 74 years. "Don't you dare give up on me," she commanded, positioning herself for CPR. Her small frame fought to compress his massive chest effectively. 12 compressions, checking for response, 12 more. I didn't come this far to lose you now. After what felt like eternity but measured only minutes, he gasped back to life. Grace nearly collapsed with relief but forced herself to continue monitoring his vital signs. Minutes 36:47. Grace maintained her vigil with the patience learned from thousands of long nights at Sunset Manor. She talked continuously, not just to keep him conscious, but because silence felt like surrender. "You've got people who love you," she whispered, adjusting the pressure bandage with steady hands. "I can tell. You take care of that photograph like it's your whole world. They're waiting for you to come home safe." Something about this stranger triggered Grace's deepest protective instincts. Maybe it was how he gripped her hand during semi-conscious moments, like a frightened child seeking comfort. Maybe it was how he tried to protect that photograph even while bleeding and unconscious. Grace found herself humming unconsciously, the same lullaby she'd sung to Lily during those precious 4 hours 54 years ago. The melody seemed to calm him, his breathing steadying whenever she sang. The physical toll on Grace mounted steadily. Her arthritis screamed from kneeling on wet asphalt. Her back spasmed from the awkward positioning required to maintain pressure on his wounds while monitoring his breathing. But every time she considered her own discomfort, she thought about her daughter, somewhere out there, possibly needing help from a stranger. Around minute 40, Grace's own strength began failing. The constant pressure, the stress, the physical demands of keeping someone twice her size alive, it pushed her 74-year-old body to its limits. Her hands shook with fatigue, her vision blurred from exhaustion. But Grace Washington had spent 20 years refusing to let death win easy victories. She repositioned herself, found new angles for applying pressure, conserved energy while maintaining life-saving intervention. In his final moments of consciousness before help arrived, the biker's eyes focused clearly on Grace's face. Through pain and confusion, something passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, something deeper that neither understood yet. He tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper above the storm. Grace leaned close, her ear near his lips. The words were unclear, but they sounded like, "Thank you, Mama." Something about his tone, the way he said it, stopped Grace's heart for a moment. Not just gratitude, but recognition, as if he'd been waiting his entire life to say those words to her. Emergency sirens finally cut through the storm's roar. Grace had never been so grateful to see flashing lights approaching through the rain. Paramedic Rodriguez jumped from the ambulance, taking in the scene with professional amazement. "Grace, what happened here?" "Single motorcycle accident, approximately 50 minutes ago," Grace reported with clinical precision. "Male, estimated age 70, 75, significant head trauma with blood loss. I've maintained pressure and monitored vitals. He went into shock around minute 20, required CPR at minute 32, responsive to voice but not oriented." Rodriguez stared at her with something approaching awe. "Grace, this is textbook trauma management. You saved his life." As the paramedics took over, Grace stepped back, her body finally allowed to acknowledge its exhaustion. Her arthritis flared, her back screamed, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Grace, you need medical attention too," Rodriguez said, noticing her condition. "What you did tonight, at your age in these conditions, it shouldn't have been physically possible." Grace watched them load the biker into the ambulance, his massive frame looking vulnerable on the stretcher. As they prepared to close the doors, his eyes found hers one more time through the chaos. His gaze held gratitude, but also something else, a look of recognition that puzzled Grace. He mouthed words she couldn't hear over the sirens, but his expression suggested he knew exactly who she was. As the ambulance disappeared into the storm, Grace stood beside her Honda, rain-soaked and exhausted, but filled with the deep satisfaction that came from using her skills when they mattered most. She didn't know she'd just saved the one person who could answer 54 years of prayers. She only knew someone's son was going home alive tonight, and that was enough. The photograph lay on her passenger seat where she'd placed it for safekeeping. She'd give it to the police to return to him. In the dashboard light, she caught another glimpse of the young woman's face and felt that strange sense of familiarity again. Grace started her Honda and drove carefully through the dissipating storm, reflecting on the evening. Her nursing instincts had proved reliable even at 74. Her emergency preparedness had paid off. Most importantly, she'd been in the right place at the right time to make a difference. She had no idea how cosmic that timing really was. Grace thought her good deed was finished when the ambulance disappeared. She had no idea the Hell's Angel was already planning to change her world forever. Officer Martinez arrived 15 minutes later, his patrol car cutting through the weakening storm. Grace sat in her Honda, hands still trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. "Grace Washington?" Martinez stepped out, recognizing her immediately. "What happened out here?" "Single motorcycle accident, officer. The rider was badly injured when I found him." Grace rolled down her window, noting how her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Martinez surveyed the twisted guardrail and scattered medical supplies. "Grace, that was incredibly brave. You probably saved that man's life." Grace shrugged, genuinely puzzled by the praise. "I have nursing training. Anyone would have done the same." "No, Grace. Most people would have been too scared to approach a Hell's Angel alone." Martinez pulled out his notepad. "Walk me through what happened." Grace provided a factual account, downplaying her role consistently. 47 minutes of life-saving intervention became keeping an eye on him until help came. "Those death's head patches. That's serious motorcycle club territory. You could have been in real danger." Grace looked at Martinez with patient eyes. "Officer, he was bleeding and unconscious. Nothing else mattered." "Did you notice any identification or personal effects?" Grace pulled out the protected photograph. "This fell from his pocket. It seemed very important to him. He kept trying to reach for it." Martinez examined the photo under his flashlight, a young black woman's professional portrait clearly treasured. "I'll make sure he gets this back. Probably family." "Please do. Family photos are precious." When Martinez mentioned possible community recognition, Grace waved him off. "That man has people who love him. Getting him home safely is reward enough." Around 11 p.m., an unexpected knock startled Grace in her apartment. Through the peephole, a well-dressed black man in his 50s, clearly out of place in her neighborhood. Grace cracked the door, chain attached. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am, I'm David Carter. I represent the gentleman you helped tonight." He showed elegant identification. "Death's Head MC, family liaison." "How is he doing?" Grace asked immediately, her nursing focus on patient outcomes. David's face brightened. "Stable, thanks to your medical expertise. Doctors said without immediate intervention he wouldn't have survived." David produced a thick envelope of cash. "The club wants to express gratitude. This covers your medical supplies, clothing replacement, any expenses." Grace saw more money than she'd held in years. "That's thoughtful but unnecessary. I keep supplies for emergencies. Ma'am, the club takes care of people who take care of family." Grace's tone stayed kind but firm. "I didn't help him for payment. I helped because he needed help. Just tell him I'm glad he's safe." David seemed impressed by her refusal. He offered an elegant business card. "At least take this. If you ever need anything, medical bills, repairs, anything, please call. He was specific about you having this." Grace accepted it to be polite. The card read, "Death's Head MC, Community Services," with a phone number. She assumed it was empty courtesy. Organizations made promises in emotional moments but rarely followed through. After David left, Grace placed the card on her nightstand beside Lily's photograph. She didn't notice the small notation on the back, "Family Reunion Specialist, ask for Bear." Grace prepared for bed, washing the stranger's blood from her hands. She'd done what her nursing training demanded: assess, intervene, stabilize. Someone's son was alive because she'd been in the right place with the right skills. In her small bathroom mirror, Grace saw a 74-year-old woman who'd spent her evening saving a life. Her arthritis ached, her back protested, but her conscience was clear. She'd answered the call when someone needed help. As Grace settled into bed, she whispered her nightly prayer, the same words she'd spoken for 54 years. "Lord, let me find my Lily before I'm too old to be the mother she deserves." The business card sat inches away, holding the key to that prayer's answer. But Grace slept peacefully, unaware that the most important night of her life was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring signs that the stranger she'd saved was planning to change her world forever. Over the next 48 hours, signs began appearing that Grace had saved someone far more important than a simple biker, and that he was planning something extraordinary. Wednesday morning brought the first surprise. Grace opened Washington Flowers to find a pristine black Harley-Davidson parked across the street, its rider wearing Death's Head colors. He sat motionless for 30 minutes, clearly watching the shop before riding away without approaching. Grace noticed but assumed coincidence. Bikers traveled these roads regularly. Around 10 a.m., a delivery van pulled up. The driver struggled with the largest flower arrangement Grace had ever seen. Easily $400 worth of exotic orchids and roses arranged in an elegant crystal vase. "Grace Washington?" The driver checked his clipboard twice. "This is for you." The card read in elegant script. "From the Death's Head family, thank you for bringing our brother home safely." Mrs. Carter, picking up her weekly irises, stared wide-eyed. "Grace, what exactly did you do Tuesday night?" Grace examined the expensive blooms, puzzled. "I helped someone who was hurt. This seems like too much for that." Throughout the day, 3 phone calls came asking about the lady who helped Boss. The callers were respectful but clearly gathering information: her health status, living situation, family circumstances. Grace answered politely but grew increasingly confused by the attention. Thursday brought escalation. Grace stopped for her routine oil change, only to find her Honda already serviced and detailed to showroom condition. "Grace, someone called this morning and paid for everything," Mechanic Joe explained, seeming as confused as she was. "Full service, new tires, brake inspection, it came to $847. They said you'd understand." Grace stared at her gleaming car. "I don't understand at all." The black Harley appeared again, this time with its rider sitting at the cafe next door, maintaining clear visual contact with her shop. When Grace waved politely, he touched his helmet respectfully but kept his distance. Thursday afternoon brought David Carter's return, his energy different, more anticipatory, almost excited. "Ma'am, I have a message from my boss. He's being discharged tomorrow and specifically requests a meeting. There's something important he needs to discuss." Grace's nursing instincts kicked in. Is he having complications, post-concussion syndrome? Does he need medical follow-up? David shook his head with a mysterious smile. "Ma'am, it's nothing medical. He says Tuesday night changed more than just his life." David pulled out a folder. "Without violating your privacy, can I ask, have you ever been separated from family? Lost touch with someone important?" Grace's heart skipped, though she didn't understand why. "Why would you ask something like that?" "Boss has been searching for someone for a very long time. Tuesday night, he got his first real clue in 15 years. David stood to leave, his expression suggesting he knew secrets that could change everything. "Ma'am, what if I told you that saving his life might have been the answer to both your prayers?" That evening, Grace held David's business card, studying the back notation she'd missed before. "Family reunion specialist, ask for Bear." The words triggered inexplicable hope mixed with fear. Could this possibly connect to her search for Lily? Tomorrow would bring answers that would change everything. Friday morning would reveal that Grace Washington hadn't just saved a Hell's Angel. She'd found the one person who could grant her lifelong wish in the most impossible way. Grace arrived at Regional Medical Center clutching David Carter's business card, her mind racing with questions she couldn't articulate. David escorted her through corridors she'd never seen, the VIP wing with private rooms, personal nurses, and security that suggested this patient was far from ordinary. "Ma'am, before we go in," David stopped outside room 314. "I need you to understand something. Boss isn't just any Hell's Angel. He's what we call a family finder." Grace's heart began racing. "A family finder?" David nodded gravely. "Someone whose life mission is reuniting separated families. Boss has been searching for someone for 54 years. Tuesday night, when you saved him, he realized God had sent him exactly who he was looking for." Grace's hand trembled on her purse strap. 54 years, the same amount of time she'd been searching for Lily. David opened the door. "Ma'am, I'd like you to meet Tommy Washington. Most people call him Bear." The transformation was startling. Without blood, leather, and emergency chaos, Grace saw a distinguished black man in his 70s. A clean-shaven face revealed gentle features lined with character. The hospital gown couldn't diminish his natural dignity, and those eyes, kind, intelligent, familiar somehow. "Ma'am," Bear stood respectfully as she entered, "my name is Tommy Washington. I've been looking for you for 54 years. Grace's oxygen caught in her throat. "Looking for me? But how could you possibly—" Then the last name hit her like lightning. "Washington?" Bear pulled out a worn photograph with hands that shook slightly. "This is my adopted daughter, Lily. She was born April 3rd, 1969. Her birth mother was listed as Grace Washington, age 17. The world tilted. Grace stared at a photo of herself at 17, holding a newborn baby during those precious 4 hours before signing adoption papers. The same photograph she'd treasured for 54 years, but taken from a different angle. That's me. That's my baby." Grace's legs gave out. Bear caught her gently, this massive man cradling the elderly woman who'd saved his life. "Grace," Bear's voice broke with emotion. "Lily was my daughter. I adopted her when I was 21, fresh out of the army. She was the light of my life." Grace looked up into his weathered face, seeing past the intimidating exterior to something achingly familiar. "She's alive? My Lily is alive?" Bear's expression shifted, and Grace's nursing experience read the change immediately. She delivered enough devastating news to recognize that look. "Grace, I need to tell you something difficult." Bear helped her to the bedside chair, his massive hands gentle as a nurse's. "Lily passed away 3 years ago. She had breast cancer." Grace's world crumbled, 54 years of hope dying in a single sentence. But Bear continued quickly, urgently. "But Grace, she lived a beautiful, full life. She became a nurse, just like her birth mother's instincts. She married a wonderful man named Robert and had 3 children. She was happy, successful, loved." Bear pulled out a thick scrapbook, pages worn from handling. "This is what I've been carrying for 3 years, Lily's entire life. She made me promise to find you and give you this." Grace opened the scrapbook with trembling hands. The first page showed a toddler taking first steps, then school photos, graduation pictures, nursing school certification, wedding day radiance, 3 beautiful children at various ages. "She became a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital," Bear explained. "Won awards for patient care. Everyone said she had a gift for making scared children feel safe." Grace traced her daughter's face in the wedding photo. Lily had grown into a stunning woman with Grace's eyes and smile, radiating the kind of confidence that comes from being deeply loved. "Before Lily died," Bear continued, "she made me promise to find her birth mother. She wanted you to know she understood why you made that impossible choice. She wanted you to know she never felt abandoned." Bear pulled out a sealed letter, yellowed with age. "This is for you. She wrote it when the cancer got bad, hoping someday I'd be able to deliver it." Grace's hands shook as she opened the envelope. The handwriting was elegant, educated, confident. "Dear birth mother," she read aloud, "if someone is reading this to you, it means Bear found you. I want you to know I never blamed you for giving me up. I understood you wanted something better for me than you could provide at 17. You gave me life twice, once when you carried me, and once when you loved me enough to let me go to parents who could give me everything I needed. I hope you lived a beautiful life and found peace with your decision. Your grateful daughter, Lily Grace Washington Thompson." "Grace," Bear's voice was thick with tears. "When I was lying on that highway Tuesday night, I was actually driving back from another failed search for you. I'd hired investigators, searched records, followed every lead for 3 years. I was ready to give up." Grace looked up from the letter, understanding beginning to dawn. "When I woke up in that ambulance and they told me Grace Washington had saved my life, I thought it was some cosmic joke. But when David showed me your identification for the police report, I knew Lily had sent me to you." Bear reached for her hands. "Grace, you didn't just save a stranger Tuesday night. You saved the father who's been trying to keep his promise to your daughter for 3 years." Grace stared at this massive, tattooed man who'd raised her baby girl, who'd loved Lily enough to spend 3 years searching for a woman he'd never met. "You have 3 grandchildren," Bear continued softly. "Marcus is 25, just finished medical school. Shayna is 22, following her mother into nursing. And little Tommy is 19, studying social work because he wants to help families like ours find each other." Grace's dying wish had just come true in the most impossible way imaginable. What Bear Washington offered Grace next would transform her final years into the most love-filled time of her entire life. Bear pulled out his phone, showing Grace a group text thread titled, "Finding Grandma Grace." Screenshots revealed 3 young adults eagerly coordinating plans to meet their grandmother. Messages ranged from, "I can't believe we're finally going to meet her," to, "Should I bring the photo albums Mom made for her?" "Grace, your grandchildren have been ready for this moment their entire lives. Marcus took emergency leave from his medical residency. Shayna called in sick to the hospital for the first time ever. Tommy drove straight up from UT Austin when I texted them yesterday." Grace stared at the messages, overwhelmed by the urgency of their excitement. These young people, her flesh and blood, had dropped everything to meet the grandmother they'd dreamed about their entire lives. "But Bear, I don't understand. I'm just an old woman who runs a flower shop. I don't know how to be a grandmother. I missed their entire childhoods." Bear's weathered face broke into a gentle smile. "Grace, you risked your life Tuesday night to save a complete stranger in a thunderstorm. You think kids who've been praying to meet their grandmother won't adore you?" Bear showed photos on his tablet, a beautiful property outside Austin with 5 houses scattered across rolling hills. "This is our family compound. 200 acres that Lily helped design before she got sick. We've kept her house exactly as she left it, hoping someday you'd come home to us." Grace studied the pictures. Lily's house was a charming cottage with wraparound porch and flower gardens that looked professionally maintained. "It's beautiful, but Bear, I can't just abandon my life, my flower shop, my neighbors who depend on me." "We're not asking you to abandon anything," Bear interrupted gently. "We're offering to expand everything you already love. The compound has 40 acres perfect for flower farming. You could grow inventory for the biggest events in Central Texas." David Carter, who'd been quietly observing, opened a thick folder. "Mrs. Washington, we've prepared some options for your consideration." The first document outlined the sale of Washington flowers to a local chain, with Grace retaining management oversight and profit sharing. Your neighbors could keep their jobs, your customers would still have their flower shop, but you'd have the financial security to make choices instead of working out of necessity. Grace examined the numbers with growing amazement. The sale price was triple what she'd estimated the little shop was worth. "But more importantly," Bear continued, "you'd have family. Marcus is completing his residency in family medicine. He wants to set up practice near the compound so he can be close to home. Shayna's applying to Austin Hospital so she can help care for you. Tommy's deferring graduate school for a year because he says meeting his grandmother is more important than any degree." Bear pulled out printed emails from the grandchildren. Marcus had written, "Grandma Grace, I'm studying medicine because Mom always said healing runs in our family. I can't wait to learn about your nursing experience and hear how you saved Bear's life." Shayna's message read, "I became a nurse because Mom told us our grandmother had healing hands. I want to learn everything you know about caring for people." Little Tommy wrote, "Grandma Grace, I'm studying social work because families shouldn't have to wait 54 years to find each other. I want to help other people find what we've found." Grace's eyes filled with tears reading their words. These young people had built their entire careers around honoring the grandmother they'd never met. "Grace," Bear's voice grew serious, "I need to be honest about something else. The Death's Head MC isn't just a motorcycle club anymore. We've evolved into a family reunification service, using our networks to find missing people. We've reunited 47 families in the past 3 years." David showed her success stories. Photos of tearful reunions, thank you letters from families, newspaper articles about their volunteer work. "Lily's death changed everything for us," Bear explained. "She made me promise not just to find you, but to help other families avoid the pain of separation. You could help us do that work, Grace. Your nursing experience, your natural compassion. We need someone exactly like you to counsel families through the reunion process." Grace looked around the hospital room at these 2 men who'd spent days planning how to give her everything she'd never dared dream of. "You're offering me a job? At 74? "We're offering you a purpose," Bear corrected. "A chance to turn your pain into healing for other people. A chance to honor Lily's memory by helping families find each other before it's too late." Bear reached for her hands with surprising gentleness. "Grace, At 74, you shouldn't be living alone above a flower shop, worrying about rent and medical bills. Let us provide security, comfort, family, everything Lily wanted her mother to have. But what if your grandchildren don't actually like me? Grace whispered her deepest fear. What if I disappoint them after they've built me up in their minds all these years? Bear chuckled warmly. Grace, Lily raised those children on stories about their brave grandmother who made the hardest choice possible out of pure love. They've been in love with you their entire lives. The kids will be here in 1 hour, Bear continued. Marcus is bringing Lily's jewelry collection. She wanted you to have it. Shayna's bringing photo albums she's made of family history. Tommy's bringing his guitar because Lily told him you used to sing lullabies. Grace stared at this massive, tattooed man who'd somehow become the key to everything she'd prayed for. Are you sure about this, Bear? I'm set in my ways. I might not fit into your family. Bear squeezed her weathered hands. Grace Washington, you are our family. You've been the missing piece for 54 years. We're not asking you to fit in. We're asking you to come home. Grace looked at Lily's photograph one more time, then back at Bear's hopeful face. Then yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. I want to meet my grandchildren. I want to hear about Lily's life. I want to be the grandmother I never thought I'd get to be. 3 months later, Grace Washington had transformed from a solitary flower shop owner into the beloved matriarch of an extended family, and the miracles were just beginning. Week 1, the reunion. Grace arrived at the compound to find 3 young adults waiting on Lily's porch, each clutching items they'd saved their entire lives to give to their grandmother. Marcus, tall and serious like his mother, held a jewelry box with trembling hands. Shayna, radiant with Lily's bright smile, gripped photo albums she'd created over the years. Tommy, barely 19 with old soul eyes, carried his guitar case. The first embrace lasted 20 minutes. None of them wanted to release the grandmother they'd dreamed about their entire lives. You look exactly like Mom described you, Marcus whispered, studying Grace's face with wonder. You have her healing hands, Shayna added, examining Grace's weathered fingers with reverence. Grandma Grace, Tommy said simply. We've been waiting for you forever. Lily's house welcomed Grace like it had been waiting decades for her return. Every room held evidence of the daughter she'd never known, nursing textbooks, family photos, flower gardens that mirrored Grace's own preferences despite the separation. Month 1, establishing new rhythms. Grace created routines that honored both her independence and her newfound family. Mornings in Lily's garden, learning which flowers her daughter had loved most. Afternoons helped expand the compound's flower cultivation from hobby to business. Evenings with grandchildren who'd rearranged their entire lives to be near her. Marcus deferred his residency to spend a year learning family history. The hospital will wait, he insisted. Grandma Grace won't be here forever, and I've got 25 years of stories to catch up on. Shayna transferred to Austin's Children's Hospital, following her mother's career path while staying close to home. Mom always said nursing was in our blood. I want to learn everything you know about caring for people. Tommy changed universities mid-semester, enrolling at UT Austin to study social work locally. Family reunification is my calling now. I want to help other families find what we found. Month 2. Business transformation. Washington Flowers evolved into Washington Family Farms, with Grace overseeing flower cultivation on 40 acres of compound land. Her expertise in arrangements combined with the Death's Head MC's business networks created opportunities she'd never imagined. Grace insisted on hiring from her old neighborhood. Mrs. Carter became head of customer relations, her gentle manner perfect for wedding consultations. The young mothers from Grace's apartment building found stable employment with benefits their families desperately needed. I always took care of people with whatever I had, Grace told a local reporter. Now I can actually solve their problems instead of just worrying about them. Month 3, the Lily Washington Foundation. Bear officially launched the family reunification service with Grace as president, combining her natural compassion with the MC's nationwide network. Their first major success, reuniting a 68-year-old Vietnam veteran with the daughter he'd never known, existed. Grace's living room became unofficial headquarters for reunion planning, her nursing experience invaluable for managing the emotional intensity of family discoveries. She understood how to guide people through grief, joy, and everything in between. Every family has a story, Grace would tell new clients. Our job is helping those stories find their way home. Community impact expanding. Local media coverage of the Route 45 miracle inspired policy discussions about adoption record accessibility. Grace testified before the state legislature about the medical importance of family history access, her personal story moving lawmakers to consider reform. The Death's Head MC's reputation transformed completely. The community that once crossed streets to avoid them now sought their help finding missing relatives. Their intimidating appearance became an asset when bureaucrats stonewalled searches. The Memorial Garden Project. Construction began on the Lily Washington Memorial Garden at Austin Children's Hospital, designed as a healing space for families facing medical crises. Grace worked with architects to create areas for reflection, hope, and reunion. Lily spent her career helping scared children feel safe, Grace explained at the groundbreaking ceremony. This garden will continue her work even after she's gone. Educational initiatives. Marcus established the Grace Washington Scholarship for nursing students from single-parent families. Shayna created a mentorship program pairing experienced nurses with students interested in family counseling. Tommy developed the first university curriculum focused specifically on adoption and reunion services. 6 months later, the foundation had helped reunite 89 families and counting. Grace's weekly schedule included reunion counseling, garden therapy sessions, and coordination with adoption agencies nationwide. At 74, she was busier than she'd ever been, but purposefully so. Grace's transformation from lonely flower shop owner to family matriarch proved that it's never too late for miracles. Her story inspired hundreds of separated families to resume searches they'd abandoned, believing that if Grace could find family after 54 years, anyone could. I thought my story was ending that night on Route 45, Grace would tell reporters. Turns out it was just beginning. 1 year after Grace Washington saved a dying Hell's Angel, she would prove that some miracles create even bigger miracles. Grace insisted on returning to the exact spot on Route 45 where she'd found Bear 12 months earlier. The anniversary pilgrimage included her 3 grandchildren, 47 Death's Head MC family members, and dozens of families they'd helped reunite. Where twisted metal had once littered the roadside, a small memorial now stood. The granite plaque read, "On this spot, kindness created family." Grace Washington proved that helping a stranger can answer your deepest prayers. I was driving home from teaching CPR that night, Grace told the gathered crowd. I never imagined I was driving toward 54 years of answered prayers. Bear stood beside her, no longer the dying stranger from the storm, but the bridge to everything she'd lost and found. Grandma Grace saved my life that night, Marcus said during the ceremony, now completing his medical residency. But she'd already saved mine just by existing. Shayna, thriving as head pediatric nurse at Austin Children's Hospital, added, Mom always said our grandmother had healing hands. She was right. They healed our whole family. Tommy, leading the university's new family reunification studies program, strummed his guitar. This song's for Grandma Grace, who taught me that home isn't a place. It's people who choose to love each other. The Lily Washington Foundation's impact had grown beyond expectations. 127 families reunited and counting. Grace's weekly radio show drew calls nationwide. Her memoir topped bestseller lists. Every family has a story interrupted by circumstances, Grace would tell listeners. Our job is helping those stories find happy endings. The Memorial Garden at Children's Hospital had become a pilgrimage site for separated families. Grace led monthly healing circles where people shared reunion stories and found hope for future connections. Bear visited Lily's grave with Grace every month, updating their daughter on the expanding mission. We kept our promise, baby girl. Your mama knows how loved you were, and she's helping other families find peace. As sunset painted the sky over Route 45, Grace reflected on the cosmic timing that changed everything. A routine drive home. A stranger was bleeding in the rain. 47 minutes that transformed countless lives. I thought I was just helping someone get home that night, Grace whispered to Bear as they walked back to their cars. I didn't know I was finding my own way home, too. Grace's prayer had evolved from, help me find my daughter, to, help me use this blessing to heal broken families. At 75, her greatest adventures were beginning. The anniversary gathering dispersed slowly, families reluctant to end the celebration. Grace watched them go, marveling at how one act of kindness had created this extended family of hope. Some miracles, she'd learned, are just the beginning of even bigger ones. Grace Washington thought she was just helping a stranger in a storm. She had no idea she was saving the one person who held the key to her lifelong dream. In 47 minutes of kindness, Grace transformed not just 2 lives, but hundreds of families who found each other because of her courage. When was the last time you stopped to help someone, even when it was dangerous or inconvenient? Grace didn't know that Hell's Angel was the answer to her prayers. She helped him because it was right. Every day, opportunities for life-changing kindness surround us. The elderly person who seems invisible, the intimidating stranger who might be someone's miracle. You might be one act of courage away from your own impossible dream coming true. If Grace's story touched your heart, subscribe for more real-life stories of impossible reunions and divine timing. Like this video if you believe miracles happen through kindness, and share it with someone who needs to remember that helping others can heal our own deepest wounds. What act of kindness could you perform today? Tell us in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else's miracle.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.